It was my 7th birthday. The living room was filled with pink and gold balloons, the scent of vanilla cake lingering in the air. I stood in front of the table, my hands clasped together, heart pounding with excitement. My parents stood beside me, smiling, not at me, but at my sister, Sophia. "Go on, sweetheart," my mother encouraged. Sophia, 2 years older, stepped forward, a glimmer of excitement in her hazel eyes. She took a deep breath and blew out the candles. The room erupted in cheers. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there, frozen, as my own birthday candles melted into tiny puddles of wax. "Happy birthday, Sophia," someone called. "But it's my birthday," I whispered, my voice barely audible. My father patted my head absent-mindedly. "You don't mind sharing, do you, Emily? Sophia loves birthdays so much." I looked at my sister, watching as she unwrapped a beautifully wrapped present. A dollhouse. My dollhouse. The one I had wished for. She beamed. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad." I clenched my tiny fists. That was the first time I understood my place in this family. I was just Emily. Sophia was the golden child, the bright star, the one who could do no wrong. And I was just there. It started subtly after that. When we were kids, my parents always bought Sophia the best toys, the prettiest dresses. I would get hand-me-downs or something, similar but less expensive. If she wanted ballet lessons, they'd enroll her in the best class in town. When I asked to learn the violin, they sighed about how expensive it was and told me to try something less demanding. Sophia basked in the attention. She would twirl in her frilly pink dresses, grinning as my mother cooed, "Oh, Sophia, you're just beautiful." "Look at me, Mommy," I'd say, spinning in the dress I'd inherited from her. My mother would glance at me, distracted, and mutter, "Yes, yes, dear, very nice." But the real sting came when I started school. I was a good student, better than Sophia, actually. I studied hard, earned top grades, and won school competitions. But no matter what I achieved, it was always dismissed. One evening, I came home clutching a certificate, beaming. "Mom, Dad, I won first place in the science fair." My father barely looked up from his newspaper. "Hmm? That's good, Emily." That same night, Sophia waltzed in and casually mentioned that she had made it onto the school dance team. My mother gasped, clapping her hands. "Oh, sweetheart, that's amazing. We have to celebrate." I sat there, my certificate still in my hands, feeling like a ghost at my own dinner table. There were moments, small, fleeting ones, where I thought maybe they would see me, like the time Sophia got sick before a big recital, and I stayed up all night making soup, bringing her medicine, cooling her forehead with a damp cloth. When my parents walked in, they kissed her forehead and said, "Oh, my poor baby, you must be exhausted, Sophia." They never once looked at me, or the time I overheard my mother speaking to a neighbor. "Sophia is our golden child," she said, her voice full of pride. "She's got such charisma, such charm. And Emily, well, Emily is just there. Just there." I held my breath, my hands gripping the staircase railing. It was such a simple phrase, but it solidified something I had felt for years. I was invisible. From that moment on, I stopped trying to win their love. What was the point? But something in me hardened that day, and I knew, one day, I would leave them behind. By the time I turned 16, I had learned the rules of the game. Sophia got what she wanted. I got what I needed, barely. She would whine about wanting the latest phone, and my parents would buy it for her within a week. When mine broke, I spent 3 months using an old, cracked flip phone until I could afford a second-hand one with my own savings. Sophia got a car for her 18th birthday, a sleek white sedan with a big red bow on top. I got a lecture about responsibility. "You're too young to be worrying about a car, Emily," my father said, sipping his coffee. "But I'm the one who works late shifts. I have to take the bus home at night," I argued, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're fine. Walking a little builds character," my mother added dismissively. Sophia, meanwhile, was taking selfies in her new car, bragging to her friends about how Mom and Dad always take care of me. I never argued anymore. Instead, I worked. I got a part-time job after school at a local cafe, saving every penny. When I wasn't working, I was cleaning, cooking, or making sure things ran smoothly at home. My parents never asked me to. They just expected it. Sophia, of course, never lifted a finger. "Emily, can you do the dishes?" My mother would call out while Sophia scrolled through her phone in the living room. "Emily, make sure you take out the trash before you leave for work." "Emily, can you drop off this bill payment on your way home?" "Emily, why is there no milk in the fridge?" It wasn't until I overheard my father telling a family friend, "Sophia is so responsible, always taking care of things at home," that I realized how deep the injustice ran. I almost laughed. Sophia? Responsible? The same girl who left dirty dishes in her room for weeks? Who never even knew how to pay a bill? But it wasn't a joke. They truly believed it. One evening, after an exhausting double shift at the cafe, I dragged myself home to find my parents and Sophia sitting at the dinner table. They were laughing, eating a meal that I had prepped the night before, while my stomach growled from skipping lunch. "Emily, you should sit and eat," my father said, as if it were a casual invitation. I sat, grateful for a moment of rest. Sophia smiled sweetly. "Mom and Dad were just telling me how proud they are of me," she said, flicking her blonde hair over her shoulder. "For, keeping the house together while you're always gone." I stared at her. Keeping the house together? My hands tightened into fists under the table. "That's right," my mother said, patting Sophia's hand affectionately. "Sophia always makes sure everything is in order." My vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to stand up and throw my plate against the wall. Instead, I forced myself to swallow the rage. "Yeah," I murmured, pushing the food around my plate. "Sophia does everything." None of them noticed the bitterness in my voice. I ate quietly, feeling the walls close in around me. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I had been waiting, hoping that they would see me, that they would one day recognize my worth. But they never would. And I was tired of trying. By the time I turned 22, I had stopped expecting fairness. Sophia and I had both finished school and started working, though the contrast between us remained as stark as ever. I landed a stable but demanding job at a logistics firm. Long hours, stressful deadlines, but decent pay. Meanwhile, Sophia jumped from one job to another, never lasting more than a few months. Every time she quit, my parents had a new excuse for her. "She just hasn't found the right fit yet," my mother would say. "Sophia deserves to be happy," my father would add. Happiness. That word didn't apply to me. My role was to keep things running. Bills had to be paid, groceries had to be bought, responsibilities had to be met. And somehow, that always fell on me. It started small. One evening, I came home to find my mother pacing in the kitchen, her hands wringing a crumpled piece of paper. "The electricity bill is overdue," she murmured. "I thought your father paid it, but—" "How much?" I asked. She hesitated. $180. It was more than I could comfortably spare, but I reached for my wallet anyway. "Here," I said, placing the cash on the counter. Her relief was immediate. "Oh, Emily, thank you." Sophia, who was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, barely looked up. A few days later, I overheard my mother talking to my aunt. "Sophia is so responsible," she gushed. "She always makes sure the bills get paid on time." I stood frozen in the hallway, gripping my coffee mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. Sophia. Responsible. I swallowed the anger and moved on. Then, my father got sick. It wasn't serious, just a bad flu. But he needed medicine, and my mother was panicking about hospital fees. "Don't worry, Mom," I said, reaching for my phone. "I'll cover it." I spent my weekend at the pharmacy, at the hospital, running errands, checking on my father. Sophia spent her weekend at brunch with friends. By Monday, he was feeling better. And that morning, I heard my mother on the phone again. "Sophia took such good care of him," she said. "She's so thoughtful." I laughed. Out loud. A bitter, humorless laugh that startled even me. I couldn't do this anymore. The breaking point came one rainy evening when I came home exhausted from work. only to be greeted with chaos. My mother was frantic. The internet's been cut off. Sophia needs it for a job interview tomorrow. I pinched the bridge of my nose. How much is it? $120. I pulled out my phone. I'll send it now. Sophia didn't even look up from her laptop. I turned to her. You could have handled this, you know. She shrugged. I didn't know when it was due. You live here too, Sophia. Why are you so dramatic? She scoffed. It's just money. Something inside me snapped. Just money. The money I worked for. The money I spent covering bills while she got praised for doing nothing. I turned to my parents. You know what? I'm done. My mother blinked. What do you mean? I mean, I'm tired of taking care of everything while Sophia does nothing. My father sighed. Emily, don't be like this. We're a family. No, we're not. We're just three people who use me as a backup plan. I turned and walked upstairs, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. That night, I booked a one-way ticket out of this house. I was done waiting for them to see me. I left before dawn. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floors beneath my feet. My suitcase was packed, my ticket was booked, and I had left a short note on the kitchen table. I have done enough. Now, you take care of yourselves. I stood at the doorway for a moment, staring into the dimly lit hallway, listening to the familiar stillness of a home that had never truly been mine. Then, without another glance, I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The bus ride to the airport was quiet. The city still slept as the morning sky turned from black to deep blue. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching as the streets I had known my whole life blurred into the past. For the first time, I felt weightless. I had spent my entire life taking care of a family that had never truly cared for me. Now, I was free. At first, my parents didn't take my absence seriously. The first few days, they barely called. When my mother finally did, her voice was light, almost amused. Emily, this is ridiculous, she said. You're being dramatic. Come home. No, I said simply. A pause. You can't just leave like this. I already did. She sighed, exasperated. Fine, be stubborn. You'll come back eventually. I hung up. A week passed, then a month. My phone stayed silent. And in that silence, I built a life. I found an apartment, a small but cozy space in the city, with big windows and a view of the skyline. I started making friends, people who saw me, who listened when I spoke, who laughed at my jokes and asked me about my day. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I woke up without the weight of obligations pressing on my chest. I came home to a place that was truly mine, where no one expected me to take care of them, where my efforts were my own. I was happy, until one evening, nearly 6 months later, when my phone rang. My mother. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? There was a long pause before she spoke. Emily, she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Things have been hard here. I didn't respond. Sophia, she's not handling things well. She doesn't cook, she doesn't clean, she doesn't pay bills. And your father, well, he's tired all the time. It's just been difficult. I closed my eyes. I could already picture the scene. Dishes piling up in the sink, unpaid bills stacking on the counter, arguments over who should do what. For the first time, they had to see the truth. For the first time, they had to realize that I had been the one holding everything together. You need to come home, my mother said, her voice cracking. We need you. I exhaled slowly. For years, I had dreamed of hearing those words. I had imagined my parents finally understanding my worth, finally acknowledging everything I had done for them. But now, hearing it, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a trap. I thought about my quiet mornings, my peaceful evenings. I thought about how, for the first time in my life, I had no one to answer to but myself. And I knew my answer. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady. A sharp inhale. Emily. You never needed me before, I said, cutting her off. You don't need me now. I hung up. And just like that, I was free. Months passed. Seasons changed. And I never went back. Life in the city was everything I had hoped for. It wasn't perfect. I worked long hours, paid my own bills, and sometimes loneliness crept in. But it was mine. Every morning, I woke up in my small apartment, brewed my own coffee, and sat by the window, watching the world move beneath me. No one called my name to do the dishes. No one expected me to clean up after them. No one erased my efforts. I was free, until one evening, when my phone rang again. I stared at the screen. My mother's name glowed against the dark background. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me told me to answer. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? There was silence at first. Then, a voice that didn't belong to my mother. Emily, it's Dad. I stiffened. My father had never called me before. Ever. Hey, I said cautiously. He exhaled. I know you probably don't want to hear from us, but we need to talk. I didn't say anything. Sophia moved out, he continued, his voice unusually subdued. She got a job offer in another state, packed her bags, and left last week. I blinked. She left? Yes. A long pause. And things have been hard for your mother and me. It turns out keeping a household running isn't as easy as we thought. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I let the silence hang between us. We were wrong, he admitted. His voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. We didn't appreciate everything you did for us, and now, well, we're struggling. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You need me to come back, I said flatly. He hesitated. Emily, we're family. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. For years, I had craved these words. I had wanted them to recognize me, to acknowledge everything I had done. And now, they finally did. But it wasn't because they loved me. It was because they needed me. Just like always. I opened my eyes and looked around my apartment. The small bookshelves, the framed photos of new friends, the cup of coffee on my desk, still warm. My life. The life I built without them. No, Dad, I said, my voice steady. I'm not coming back. A sharp inhale. Emily, I hope you and Mom figure things out, I continued, but I'm done being your backup plan. A heavy silence. Then a quiet, resigned sigh. Okay, he said softly. I waited for more. An argument, a guilt trip, something. But there was nothing. For the first time, they had no control over me. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt untouchable. Take care, Dad, I said. And then, I hung up. I put the phone down and turned back to my window. The city lights stretched endlessly before me, glowing like 1,000 tiny possibilities. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was already there, and I was never going back.